The rise of civil society and the spotlight now really shimmering over all of us, rulers and ruled, governments and people, business sector, private sector, public sector, etc. Really is helping a lot to improve the position of governance in Africa.
Civil society, I think, is catching up in Africa, and I think it's very much important. Democracies are rather weak still, and civil society can bring very much contribution to balancing power and to have the leaders be more accountable.
In Africa, everything happening is about relationships. It's about how people live on a day-to-day basis. Politics does not see this to be important. Politics is looking for the numbers of votes. And yet when the relationships are not right, it is at the, so to speak, forefront of what happens to now escalate violence. Civil society is able to be less bureaucratic and is able to raise the high stakes in terms of the interrelationship between the conflicts, the interrelationship between these communities and development. And so civil society also brings in an added value of good advocacy for policy formulation in response to these conflicts.
When you go back home after getting out of those crises and signing an agreement, some people have to hold on that agreement and monitor it, monitor the implementation, and make those people accountable because they sign it. So it's a kind of witness. If you take the women of the Manu River, for example, they signed the peace agreement as observer. It means that civil society can be accountable to say that you agree on this, I was there, but not just the accountability, but also participating, because at the end of the day, they are discussing the issue that concern their community, their family, themselves.
Civil society's role is very important, but it's often not used very well. Let me give you an example from Sudan. Most of the negotiations under the Comprehensive Peace Agreement have been between two political parties, the National Congress Party in the north and the Southern People's Liberation Movement in the south. Civil society has no formal role in this process, and they feel very frustrated, and they should feel frustrated, because the political parties have agendas that don't always take account of the needs of women, of business, of young people, etc. And I think it's very important to get civil society involved, not only to identify more of the issues, but to let the negotiators know that they count.
I think in many scenarios, civil society has been quite on the periphery. In many cases, they've been more trying to organize women and young people. They've been trying to I think, assist more or less in reconstruction after, but not necessarily in prevention of conflicts. And I think in many ways, civil society needs to reinvent itself. I think in many ways, civil society must see how to engage citizens, because citizens at the end of the day are the ones who suffer. There's an intelligence around citizens. And I think for me, I see those two combining in a way that civil society, mostly NGOs basically, should move beyond the kind of elitist boardroom scenario building situations, and in a way that they actually begin to get in touch with realities and see themselves as part of communities, and therefore as part of the preventive mechanisms for conflict.
NGOs need to understand the limits of their involvement also. We don't have the same carrots and sticks that states have. And so we have to understand the limitations. And when NGOs don't understand those limitations, that's not also to say that you should put artificial limitations on yourself. There are many sources to power, and what NGOs have to do is to understand, given their own objective conditions, their own position, what is their leverage and what is their comparative advantage, and then work on the basis of that comparative advantage.
But the civil society, we have to ensure that the groups we use are groups with real contacts and real connection to the grassroots. they could act as, if they are effective, they can be effective conduits of the voices of the grassroots to the upper level. You can't bring everybody, every single individual to the table. What you want to do is to put mechanisms in place that would ensure that you have a good representation of all opinions and of all interests brought to the table. And the civil society can help when they are well marshaled and if they are really representative.